The American frontier has long been revered as an iconic stage where some of history's most legendary shootouts unfolded. Despite Hollywood's idealized portrayal, the Wild West gave rise to genuine legends whose fame endures even today. These figures became symbols of bravery and marksmanship, captivating imaginations then and now. Though romanticized, the Wild West remains a compelling chapter in American history, blending fact with enduring myth.
Vendetta Ride. Many stories of gunfights neglect the aftermath, but this one directly stems from the notorious Corral confrontation. The Cowboys gang, being extensive, naturally sought retribution against the Earp brothers for their fallen members. This led to a brutal attack that severely injured Virgil Earp and an ambush that resulted in Morgan Earp's death. In retaliation, Wyatt Earp, now serving as a U.S. Marshal, organized a federal posse to pursue the perpetrators, an endeavor known as the Vendetta Ride. From March 20 to April 15, 1882, the posse tracked down members of the Cowboys. In Tucson, they encountered Frank Stillwell, one of the suspects in Morgan's murder, and he was killed during the confrontation. However, the most notable event of the Vendetta Ride occurred near Iron Springs on March 24th. The posse confronted 9 cowboys, including William Brocious, also known as Curly Bill, who was implicated in Morgan Earp's assassination. Curly Bill noticed the approaching posse and fired his shotgun at Wyatt Earp, but he missed. Wyatt returned fire, striking Curly Bill in the chest and killing him instantly. A subsequent exchange of gunfire ensued between the two groups, but no further fatalities occurred except for the loss of a horse belonging to one of the lawmen, Texas Jack Vermillion. Eventually, the Cowboys retreated. During the encounter, Wyatt Earp's clothing was pierced by several bullets. One shot hit his boot heel and another struck his saddle horn, yet he emerged unharmed once again. The Vendetta Ride exemplifies how law enforcement and outlaw factions were frequently locked in a deadly struggle for dominance. Wyatt Earp's pursuit of justice, driven by personal loss, illustrates the intense and often personal nature of frontier law enforcement. This period highlights the challenges of maintaining order in a lawless environment and underscores the perilous existence of those who sought to uphold justice amidst rampant criminal activity. These 10 legendary shootouts are more than mere tales of violence. They encapsulate the raw, rugged spirit of the American frontier. From the fearless stand of Captain Jonathan R. Davis to the relentless pursuit of justice by Wyatt Earp, each story reveals a unique aspect of the Old West's complex and often brutal legacy. As we look back on these historical moments, we gain a deeper understanding of the bravery, justice, and retribution that defined an era. Davis-Sidney Ducks Shootout. One individual you certainly would not want to encounter in a confrontation is Captain Jonathan R. Davis. On December 19, 1854, Davis, by himself, successfully defended against a notorious gang of robbers, resulting in the deaths of 11 outlaws. Jonathan R. Davis was a former Army captain who had transitioned into prospecting. On that fateful day, he was working with 2 partners when they were suddenly ambushed by a group of bandits. Nearly half of these outlaws were Sydney Ducks, criminal immigrants from Australia. The remaining members comprised Mexicans, Americans, Brits, and even a Frenchman, totaling 13 men. This gang was believed to have been responsible for 10 murders in the days leading up to the ambush. The outlaws charged at the 3 prospectors, firing their guns. Davis's partners were immediately struck down. One died instantly, while the other succumbed to his injuries a few days later. Davis managed to draw his revolvers and returned fire. By the time his ammunition was depleted, 7 outlaws were incapacitated. 4 of the surviving gang members, armed with bladed weapons, 3 with bowie knives and 1 with a sword, advanced toward Davis. Fortunately for him, Davis was proficient with his own knife. He skillfully defended himself, managing to disarm and subdue each of his attackers, even injuring one severely. Realizing they were outmatched, the remaining robbers fled. By the end of the ordeal, 7 outlaws lay defeated at Davis's feet, and 4 more would later succumb to their injuries. This story illustrates the perilous environment of the American frontier, where individuals often had to rely on their skills and bravery to survive. Captain Jonathan R. Davis's remarkable defense against overwhelming odds demonstrates the unpredictability and danger of life during this period. His actions not only highlight personal valor, but also reflect the broader lawlessness and violence that characterized the era. Understanding such events helps to appreciate the complex and often brutal reality of the Old West, beyond the romanticized versions often depicted in popular culture. Corral. This is arguably the most renowned gunfight of the Old West, one that catapulted Wyatt Earp into legendary status. However, this event also involved 8 other individuals who did not achieve the same level of fame. At the time, Wyatt's older brother Virgil was actually the leader of their group, serving as the town marshal in Tombstone. Nonetheless, Wyatt Earp captured the public's imagination, largely due to his appearances in popular dime novels of the era. On one side were the 3 Earp brothers, Wyatt, Virgil, and Morgan, accompanied by their friend Doc Holliday. Opposing them were 5 members of a notorious gang known as the Cowboys, Ike and Billy Clanton, Billy Claiborne, and Tom and Frank McClory. Tensions had been escalating between these groups, with the Cowboys making several thinly veiled threats against the Earps. On October 26, 1881, the situation reached a breaking point, prompting the 3 Earp brothers and Holliday to confront the Cowboys, seeking to resolve their differences. According to the Earps and eyewitnesses, the confrontation was not intended to become violent. The Earps instructed the Cowboys to surrender their weapons, but the situation quickly escalated when the Cowboys refused to comply. By the end of the brief encounter, which lasted only 30 seconds, 3 Cowboys were dead, Virgil and Morgan Earp were wounded, and Doc Holliday had been grazed by a bullet. Although the gunfight did not actually occur at the OK Corral, it secured its place in history and popular culture. The notoriety of this event underscores the broader themes of justice, reputation, and myth-making that characterize the American frontier. Wyatt Earp's rise to fame, in part through sensationalized storytelling, reflects how historical events can be transformed into enduring legends. The involvement of less celebrated figures like Virgil and Morgan Earp, and the members of the Cowboys, also reminds us that history is often more complex than the stories that survive. The Dalton Gang was among the most infamous criminal groups operating in the Old West. Led by their elder brother Grattan "Grat" Dalton, the gang included his brothers Bob and Emmett, along with several other members. On October 5, 1892, they undertook their most daring heist by attempting to rob 2 banks simultaneously. The banks were located on opposite sides of the street in Coffeyville, Kansas. Their plan faced an immediate setback when a quick-thinking employee informed them that the safe was on a timer and could not be opened immediately. This delay allowed the townspeople to become aware of the robbery attempts. The residents armed themselves and positioned themselves to confront the gang as they exited the banks. In the subsequent confrontation, 3 townspeople were injured, and the town marshal lost his life. 4 members of the Dalton Gang, including Grat and Bob Dalton, also perished. The most unexpected turn of events involved the youngest Dalton brother, Emmett. Despite sustaining multiple injuries, Emmett survived and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. After serving his sentence, Emmett capitalized on his notoriety and moved to Hollywood. In 1918, he wrote a novel about his experiences titled Beyond the Law. That same year, the book was adapted into a Western film in which Emmett portrayed himself and his brothers. Following his brief stint in the film industry, Emmett transitioned to a quieter life, marrying and working as a real estate agent. The story of the Dalton Gang highlights the daring and recklessness characteristic of outlaw gangs in the Old West. The community's swift response reflects the collective effort to uphold justice and protect their town. Emmett Dalton's later life illustrates a significant shift from his criminal past to a rehabilitated public figure, highlighting themes of redemption and the complex legacy of outlaws who lived through the transitional period of the American frontier. Frisco Shootout. Among one-sided confrontations in the Old West, the gunfight on December 1st, 1884, in Reserve, New Mexico, stands out prominently. On one side was a lone lawman named El Fuego Baca, and on the other, a group of agitated cowboys numbering between 40 and 80. The conflict began when Baca arrested Charlie McCarty, a drunken man recklessly firing his guns. McCarty, however, had many dangerous friends who soon demanded his release. Baca managed to repel this initial confrontation, during which the leader of the cowboys died when his horse fell on him. As rumors spread of a supposed Mexican uprising, a larger, angrier mob formed to confront the perceived threat. Baca took refuge in a small house owned by a local resident. When William Hearn, the mob's leader, attempted to forcefully enter the house, Baca shot him, initiating a standoff that would last for an astonishing 36 hours. Up to 80 cowboys reportedly participated in the prolonged gunfight, firing as many as 4,000 rounds at the house. Remarkably, none of these shots hit Baca. He had wisely dug a hole in the dirt floor of the house, which provided him effective cover from the bullets. Eventually, the mob exhausted their ammunition. When the proper authorities arrived, the cowboys surrendered, leaving Baca victorious. This incident underscores the intense nature of frontier justice and the quick escalation of conflicts into large-scale confrontations. Baca's resilience and resourcefulness turned a dire situation into a legendary tale of endurance, reflecting the rugged individualism and turbulent dynamics of frontier life. 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight. This confrontation is often referred to as the El Paso gunfight, but it is more famously known by the dramatic title 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight. The incident prominently featured Dallas Stoudenmire, a marshal with a formidable reputation for decisively handling conflicts. Throughout his relatively short tenure as marshal, Stoudenmire was responsible for the deaths of 10 individuals, a number surpassing many other notable figures of the Old West. The events unfolded on April 14, 1881, when a Mexican posse was searching for 2 missing vaqueros, or Mexican cowboys, who had been pursuing cattle rustlers. Their investigation led them to El Paso, specifically Johnny Hale's ranch. The subsequent trial resulted in the conviction of 2 of Hale's accomplices for the murders of the vaqueros. Constable Gus Krempkow, who was fluent in Spanish, served as the interpreter during the trial. Later that day, Krempkow was confronted by Hale and his friend, former Marshal George Campbell. Hale, angered by Krempkow's perceived allegiance to the Mexicans, seized Campbell's gun in a moment of fury and shot Krempkow. Stoudenmire, positioned across the street, heard the commotion, and swiftly entered the scene with his firearms drawn. In the chaos, an innocent bystander was unintentionally struck first. Staudenmeier then turned his attention to Hale, aiming and fatally wounding him. Despite his critical injuries, Krempkow managed to draw his own weapon and injure Campbell. Staudenmeier then fired at Campbell, who succumbed to his injuries shortly thereafter, as did Krempkow. Though technically the 4 fatalities did not occur within 5 seconds, the name 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight has persisted. This incident highlights the volatile nature of frontier justice and the swift, often deadly resolutions to conflicts in the Old West. It also underscores the challenges faced by law enforcement officials like Staudenmeier, who operated in a milieu where split-second decisions had profound consequences. The involvement of multiple parties, Hale, Campbell, and Krempkow, reflects the intricate web of personal and legal entanglements that characterized many such events. Power's Cabin Shootout. This event represents one of the last significant gunfights of the American West, occurring in 1918. To put this into perspective, the last participant of the altercation passed away in 1976. It's astonishing to consider that someone who began life in the Old West lived long enough to witness the disco era. While World War I was causing upheaval across the globe, the Galiuro Mountains in Arizona remained part of the untamed and turbulent frontier. Here, Jeff Power and his sons John and Tom led a modest life as ranchers and miners. On February 9, 1918, Sheriff Robert Frank McBride, accompanied by 3 deputies, set out to the Power cabin to serve 4 warrants. John and Tom were wanted for evading the draft, while Jeff Power and an employee, Tom Sisson, were implicated in the suspicious death of Jeff's daughter, Ola May. The exact details of who initiated the conflict remain unclear. However, at dawn, the following day, an exchange of gunfire ensued, resulting in 4 fatalities and sparking one of the largest manhunts in Arizona's history. 2 deputies lost their lives almost immediately, as did Jeff Power, who was outside the cabin. The sheriff also perished in the confrontation, prompting the remaining deputy to retreat, which allowed the brothers and Sisson to flee. The subsequent pursuit saw multiple posses organized to capture the fugitives, who were eventually apprehended by an army patrol a month later. This incident underscores the lingering volatility of the American frontier even into the early 20th century. The Power family story highlights the complex interplay of personal survival, legal authority, and the harsh realities of life on the frontier. The involvement of draft evasion reflects the broader national context of World War I, while the pursuit and eventual capture of the fugitives illustrate the persistent efforts to impose law and order in a region resistant to it. The Power Shootout serves as a poignant reminder of the transitional period in American history when the Old West's legacy still cast a long shadow over modernizing influences. Gunfight at Blazer's Mill. The Lincoln County War, spanning much of 1878, was a prolonged conflict between 2 factions vying for dominance over the dry goods trade in Lincoln County. Tensions reached a critical point with the assassination of John Tunstall, a leader of one faction. In response, Tunstall's followers formed a posse known as the Regulators, determined to avenge his death by targeting those responsible. The Regulators were led by Cowboy Dick Brewer and included notable gunfighters of the era, most famously Billy the Kid. One of the most legendary episodes of this conflict was the gunfight at Blazer's Mill, which marked the final stand of Andrew Buckshot Roberts against a dozen or so Regulators. Roberts had entered Blazer's Mill, a building that also served as a trading post, when he was approached by a Regulator demanding his surrender. The situation quickly escalated as more armed regulators arrived, intent on taking Roberts by force. Refusing to be captured, Roberts grabbed his rifle and began shooting, wounding several of his attackers, though none fatally at that moment. Roberts himself suffered a grievous wound, being shot in the stomach. Out of ammunition, he took refuge inside the mill and barricaded himself. The regulators hesitated to confront Roberts directly due to his formidable defense. Dick Brewer then attempted to outflank Roberts by circling around the mill, hoping to catch him off guard. Brewer fired, but missed his target. In response, Buckshot Roberts returned fire, hitting Brewer in the eye and killing him instantly. This decisive shot demoralized the regulators, causing them to retreat. However, Roberts succumbed to his injuries the following day. This confrontation at Blazer's Mill highlights the intense and often personal nature of frontier justice during the Lincoln County War. It underscores the lethal reality of feuds in the Old West, where loyalty and vengeance often dictated actions more than the rule of law. This historical event, while dramatic, sheds light on the broader social and economic struggles that fueled the Lincoln County War, illustrating the complex interplay of personal vendettas, economic ambitions, and the quest for power in a lawless land. Long Branch Saloon Gunfight. Once upon a time, Dodge City, Kansas stood as a prominent hub in the Old West, with the Long Branch Saloon reigning as its most infamous establishment. During its heyday, the saloon attracted a roster of legendary figures, among them the renowned gunslingers Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Among these figures was Levi Richardson, a notable gunman of his era. Richardson found himself at odds with another patron, Frank Loving, reportedly due to an incident involving Loving's wife. Initially, their conflict simmered with exchanged insults and tensions. Matters escalated in March 1879 when a physical altercation erupted between them. However, the climax came on April 5, 1879, when Richardson entered the saloon seeking Loving, who was absent at first. Richardson began playing poker until Loving arrived and took a seat at another table. Richardson approached and engaged in a hushed conversation with Loving before gunfire erupted. Eyewitnesses reported 5 or 6 shots fired during the altercation. Richardson sustained 3 gunshot wounds, whereas Loving escaped with a minor graze from a bullet. Loving was arrested, but later released, claiming self-defense in the incident. Strangely, Loving met his demise in another infamous gunfight known as the Trinidad Gunfight, where he was killed by the gambler John Allen, who similarly received an acquittal on grounds of self-defense. The story reflects the volatile nature of frontier life, where disputes often escalated dramatically and lethally. It underscores the prevalence of gun violence as a means of settling conflicts in an era where law enforcement was rudimentary and justice often subjective. The stories of Richardson and Loving intertwine with broader themes of honor, pride, and the perils of a society where personal grievances could swiftly turn deadly. Thus, while romanticized in folklore and popular culture, the reality of life in Dodge City and similar frontier towns was far more unpredictable and perilous. Hickok Tut Shootout. Westerns have perpetuated the idea of the duel, a face-off between 2 individuals to determine the fastest draw. However, such showdowns were actually rare occurrences in the Old West. Most shootouts involved chaotic exchanges among multiple gunmen firing in all directions. Nonetheless, the concept of the duel gained prominence through a famous incident involving Wild Bill Hickok, which transformed him into a legendary figure. The renowned duel took place on July 21, 1865, in Springfield, Missouri, pitting Wild Bill against his former friend turned rival, David Tut. Their relationship had soured over financial matters, exacerbated by Tut's habit of loaning money to others and advising them on how to outwit Hickok in card games, despite Bill consistently winning. Tut's actions culminated in a public dispute when he accused Hickok of owing him $35, while Hickok claimed it was only $25, refusing to pay the extra $10. In a move to shame Hickok, Tut seized his gold watch as collateral, challenging Bill's reputation as a professional gambler who settled his debts. Faced with constant provocation and unable to resolve the dispute peacefully, the two adversaries agreed to settle matters with a duel. Hickok emerged victorious, cementing his reputation as a skilled gunslinger. However, unlike the cinematic portrayals, the aftermath was far from glamorous. Hickok faced murder charges but was later acquitted on grounds of self-defense. This historical incident highlights the complexities of life in the Wild West, where personal disputes could escalate dramatically. It underscores the precarious nature of justice and reputation in frontier society, where conflicts often ended in violence. Hickok's case also reflects broader themes of honor, pride, and the harsh realities of maintaining respect in a lawless era. Thus, while Western films have romanticized the idea of duels, the actual events often involved deeper, more nuanced motivations and consequences.
Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.